welcome to my humble abode. It is time to talk about art, more specifically artists. I remember when I was in high school, like 16 years old, I always thought I was like a bad artist because I felt like the way that I made art was like anti-artist. I felt like I was super messy. I saw other people meticulously planning out their artwork when I would just kind of throw myself into it and I was super messy, and it made me feel a little bit wrong for the way that I made art. And if you have ever felt like that, I just want you to know your approach to artwork isn't wrong, it's just different because there's no one right way to be an artist. And to illustrate this point, today I'm breaking down the different flavors of artists so that you can discover which one you are and tap into your unique strengths so that you can make artwork in the way that fulfills you best. This video is inspired by The Thought Spot, who makes videos in the same format, and you can check out her videos in the description. Absolutely, I am a huge fan. The first flavor I want to talk about is the Powerhouse Artist.
Oh my god, I'm feeling it. I'm gonna breakdance.
So the Powerhouse Artist is someone who has an endless stream of ideas and are usually equally passionate about those ideas. They act first, think later, and often don't care about the boxes that other people put them in. In fact, they tend to build their own boxes. And they might have so many different ideas that they just feel like they don't have time to do it all. I remember reading about shiny object syndrome, which is the idea that if you get too distracted by so many different ideas, you end up not walking in one path, and then you end up not specializing and not growing to your fullest potential. In other words, flighty ideas are detrimental to your art practice, is what I read. But for the Powerhouse Artist, I think it's the opposite. The Powerhouse Artist usually gets their best work done when they're in the middle of working and thinking through their ideas in the middle of working on it. In fact, if the Powerhouse Artist sits down to plan something out, it's usually a complete waste of time because they end up changing the plan once they start working. They're all about action, impulse, and instinct. The greatest strength for the Powerhouse Artist is how easy it is for them to take action. When other people might feel a little bit afraid of a blank canvas, the Powerhouse Artist rushes right in with no hesitation. They go at their artwork 110% and it shows. When you look at artwork made by a Powerhouse Artist, sometimes it can feel like a punch in the face because there's just so much going on. And you can often see their thoughts forming as they're working. You can see that reflected in the finished product. New ideas next to old ideas, all merging together for an expressive, powerful painting. And this might be an unpopular opinion, but I would also argue Monet could be a powerhouse painter. I say this because he's famous for making the same paintings over and over and over, specifically at different times of day, and is famously said that while he was in the middle of making one of these haystack paintings, he shouted to his stepdaughter, I think it was, he shouted to his stepdaughter, hey, get me another canvas, because the light had changed, and so he needed to change the colors that he was painting with. If that doesn't say Powerhouse Artist, I don't know what does, like changing your ideas right in the middle of you working. These are the kinds of artists that are not afraid to throw things away. They don't see their effort as wasted whenever they change ideas. They see it as part of the process. Monet was also extremely prolific and made so many paintings throughout the course of his life. He didn't care about fitting into boxes. He just cared about expressing his version of the world that he saw and loved. Powerhouse artists' greatest strength is their abundance of ideas. They just have idea after idea to the point where it's hard for them to get attached to them, because the second you understand one idea, it disappears and another one pops up. Because of this, they're also prone to feeling mental fatigue and even doubt with their ability to capture it all. If this sounds like you, it might be helpful to journal and get everything out on paper. I know that flighty ideas is something that I also deal with, and so I have a whole system for capturing those ideas as they come, sort of like they're butterflies around me, and I just kind of like swap, get the little net, you know what I mean. In a way, you have to develop a net that works for you to capture these ideas as they come and go. And if they go, don't worry, more will come, I promise. If you relate to being a powerhouse artist, I really want to encourage you to develop a sense of self-trust like a muscle. Learn to trust and love your instincts rather than viewing them as something that derails you. Work with them and they will reward you for it. The next kind of artist is the planner.
I was. Anderson, don't talk out loud. You lower the IQ of the whole street.
So on the other side of the spectrum, the planner artist can see the work that they want to do from a bird's eye view and carefully plans out their moves beforehand. They work in a much more linear fashion. Instead of jumping into action, they like to sit and think about what moves they're about to make. And it's in that planning stage, that careful organization of their ideas and strategy, that makes their work so convincing. It's the kind of artwork you feel like you can just sink into. I had an art professor once who said, plan your color. Oh, I need a paint palette to demonstrate this. One second. I had an art professor once who said, plan your colors here, not here, pointing at the canvas. And if that doesn't say planner, I don't know what does. The Impressionists are known for mixing their colors directly onto the canvas. It just goes to show you there's no one right way to paint, however works best for you in your practice. Salvador Dali is a great example of a planner. You can see all of the different theory behind the work that he creates. Like this painting, made intentionally for the viewer to step back and for the painting, optics-wise, to be viewed from afar so that all the little pixelated pieces can merge together for you to see it as it's intended to be seen. Another example is the pointillism movement, which does a very similar thing, placing one color next to another to make them blur from afar. This is the kind of artwork that requires you to sit down and think about every move you're about to make on the canvas before you make it. Planner artists are a lot like scientists in this way. It kind of goes hand in hand, that planners often lean towards realism, mostly because it's impossible to make this kind of art without careful planning. But I also want to highlight that planners can also be abstract painters. When the planner works in abstract, their strokes are usually on the minimal side. They stand before the canvas, thinking about where exactly it's going to go, and then they execute it carefully. That's very different than just letting the paint do what it wants to do on the canvas. A good example of this is the artist Brachida. Maybe. I don't know for sure if this is their creative process, but I could be convinced that they are the planner type. For the process behind their artwork, they mention how they journal ahead of time. And if you look at the careful execution of line in their work, it just looks very meticulously planned, as if the artist took a step back from the canvas, kind of looked at it for a second and said, where exactly is this line going to go? And then they approached it and did it. It doesn't look like they're just kind of flinging things, if you know what I mean, like Jackson Pollock style. It has a very quiet, subdued power to it instead. The greatest strength of the planner is their patience. They're willing to wait for the exact right moment to put pen to paper, brush to canvas. They don't rely on impulse. Instead, they trust their unique vision and hone their skills to portray that vision. Something the planner can struggle with, though, is their doubt. By nature, they do a lot of thinking before they approach the canvas, and so sometimes they can doubt the best way to approach an idea to the point of like procrastinating way too long and ending up just not taking advantage of what could have been a great idea. In these moments, it might be helpful for the planner to remember that ideas can be reworked. If you make that move and it ends up not being quite right, canvases can be repainted. Your ability to thoroughly plan projects is such a gift and can be your superpower. But I also want you to think about the fact that you are safe to make mistakes and to change your mind. Let's talk about the persistent artist next.
I can do this all day.
This is a little bit of a blend between the planner and the powerhouse. Like the planner, the persistent artist usually has one or two ideas they want to pursue. They don't have the flighty ideas like the powerhouse does, but they do have the ambition and energy of the powerhouse artist. You can think of the persistent artist kind of like a Captain America type who has an end goal they know they're working towards and they're clear about that, but they're just very flexible in their methods. They're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. The persistent artist usually enters the studio with one idea, but ends up being experimental in the execution of their idea. They don't feel tied down to method the way that a planner does. The powerhouse artist can make a living portrait of their ideas when they work. The persistent artist can be a little bit more subtle in this though. It can come across like a planner's art sometimes when the persistent artist works, but the difference is the piles of happy accidents, paintings in the corner of their studio, the failures upon failures of attempts to get this idea to come to life that will never see the light of day because they just kept working at it and reworking it and reworking it until that idea was perfectly memorable in the state that it is today. The persistent artist is the type that when it comes to their artwork will say, I'll know it when I see it. And they can spend hours experimenting actively to fine-tune the results of their artwork in the studio. The persistent artist is the type to finally get something right on the page and then start a new painting and go, okay, now I have the plan, let's recreate it just like that. They love to think and work at the same time. One of the greatest strengths for the persistent artist is their detachment to process. They don't let things get them down for too long. They see mistakes not as failures, but as simple experimentation. And this strength is so valuable because getting caught up and trying again oftentimes makes the biggest difference in how far your art can carry you. One thing the persistent artist might struggle with is learning when to stop. When is something finished? I remember when I was in art school, I shared some of my work in progress photos for one of my paintings, and my classmate said, I think you should really consider what finished means in your artwork, because there are some phases in the in-between where that got painted over that have a lot of heart and beauty in them that I think would work possibly better than the finished product. Learning when to slow down and call something finished is something the persistent artist has to learn to navigate. Something we all learn to navigate, honestly, but perhaps the persistent artist more than any of us. What do you think? Do you resonate with any of these flavors of artists, or do you have more flavors in mind? Are there any parts of your art practice that you feel almost scared of, ashamed of, or doubtful of, that you feel like, if I could just stop being this certain way, then everything would be okay, man? Because that's honestly a lot of what inspired this video, is my own like ickiness around my experimentation and my process with work. So if you have any ickiness towards your own process, I would love to like dissect and look at that a little bit. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like my other video, People Want to Buy Your Art, They Just Don't Know It Yet. You can click here to see that one. As always, spending any amount of time here on this channel with me is a gift. I really would consider it a gift. I really do consider it a gift. And for that, this humble artist says, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would give you Tazo and like bribe you into subscribing with my little kitty, but he's off somewhere, I don't know where. He's off living his best kitty life. What can I say? This is the way of things. Your cat